Hello everybody, it's TannerFishies here, back again with a new Ninjago video here on the channel. In today's video we are going to be talking about the character of Lloyd Garmadon, and we are going to be personally diving deep into his trauma. Why, you might ask? Because, frankly, I want to. Now, of course, in this current Ninjago drought, there's not a whole lot to talk about. However, there is indeed a new storyline coming out every week on Twitter, of course written by series creator Tommy Andreasen, and a very popular Ninjago community member being known as the Marvelous Jan. Someone who I consider to be a very good friend of mine. And the story that they've been collaborating on every week is known as The Splinter in the Blind Man's Eye. As of the time of recording this video, there are currently 4 chapters out right now. It is a could-be-canon storyline, meaning that it might be applicable to the main timeline, but it also might be in its own little pocket reality, not connecting at all to the primary Ninjago timeline. The story itself is set in between the events of Season 10 and Season 11, so in between March of the Oni and Secrets of the Forbidden Spinjitzu, and like I said, it comes out every single week on Fridays with 4 chapters out right now. I've been reading through this storyline every single week, and I've been very impressed with what I have read. I want to highlight Chapter 3 specifically in this video though, because it might be my favorite chapter that they've released so far. And part of that reason is because it dives deep into Lloyd's trauma and actually showcases a lot about his character that the TV show itself either avoids entirely or hardly touches on. Anyway, Chapter 3 is my favorite chapter because it dives deep into Lloyd's inner trauma and his inner monologue with himself and all of his previous and past experiences that of course lead to this trauma. Reading about Lloyd's trauma and everything that he's experienced all the way up to Season 11 had me thinking that, wow, this guy probably isn't okay in the modern day, and it's quite impressive that Lloyd has been able to endure all of this trauma. Being the Green Ninja is definitely not an easy task for Lloyd, and the story is written as such to highlight this key element of his character. Lloyd Garmadon does not have an easy job here, and this chapter definitely dives deep into that, and I really enjoy how this chapter overall was written. And I wanted to go over a couple of examples in today's video as to how this story does a fantastic job at presenting Lloyd's trauma. First things first, let's go through all of the events that are actually covered in this chapter, and listing all of these events out will give us a good idea as to where Lloyd is mentally. For one, he was abandoned as a child by his mother and left to grow up in a very traumatic boarding school, and it was obviously not a good place for Lloyd at such a young age. His next traumatic event came in the form of when he nearly died in the fire temple during the ninja's attempt to secure the 3rd Fang Blade. Yeah, Lloyd almost burned up and died there if it wasn't for Kai. Next, the Great Devourer's rampage is touched on as well, which I find to be quite intriguing because it showcases Lloyd's guilt and how he blames himself for the Devourer's rampage, because remember, Lloyd himself unleashed a large amount of serpentine. Next, we highlight Lloyd battling the Overlord and how he had to watch all of his friends fall to darkness while standing alone against Ninjago's greatest darkness. Building onto that, when Lloyd's golden power was stolen by the Overlord in the very next season, that in and of itself was also extremely traumatizing. Following that, Garmadon's sacrifice during Season 4 also laid a heavy burden on Lloyd's character, because he had to watch his father come back from darkness only to be sacrificed once again. Morrow's possession is among the actual events throughout Lloyd's life that has affected him the most, and we will get more into that later on, but still, Morrow's possession was very traumatic and very difficult for Lloyd to deal with. Next, we have Master Wu getting lost in time, which in turn caused Lloyd to immediately take command of the ninja, and he would often question whether or not he was good enough to lead the team. During Sons of Garmadon, we had Lord Garmadon's resurrection, and as such we had the beatdown at Cryptarium Prison, in which Lloyd suffered heavy physical injuries and a lot of mental scarring as a result of his father coming back, but not even being remotely close to what he remembered. And finally, we have the idea of Lloyd constantly being confused and questioning himself as to whether or not the vision that he saw of the first Spinjitzu master was even real, or perhaps he's just going insane. I really liked how this chapter and this story actually highlights all of these traumatic events for Lloyd, because when you think about it, the guy has been through quite a bit, and this list alone pretty much showcases that. The list that I just talked about does not cover every single traumatic event, but even so, the list on its own is quite a lot to take in, and actually looking at all of these things that have happened to Lloyd, it's kind of impressive that this guy is still around and still kicking as the Green Ninja. I want to take this opportunity to dive into some of my favorite paragraphs from the actual chapter itself. I will be reading them word for word, but like I said, feel free to read this chapter on your own and read the rest of the storyline. You can find it easily on Twitter. We have 4 chapters right now. But yeah, let's go through some of my favorite examples of the writing and how it actually describes Lloyd's trauma. The first one that I want to to read and talk about is all about Lloyd and his current relationship with Garmadon. That night in Cryptarium Prison, where his powers were far stronger than I had ever seen them before. The night the Green Ninja lost the fight, and the Sons of Garmadon had won. The night my own father claimed he had no son. These memories turned nightmares have just about broken my very spirit, and have made it near impossible to be the protector of Ninjago I am destined to be. Even now, only shortly after the defeat of the Oni, I fear for my father's eventual return. This excerpt for me is very powerful because it showcases that Lloyd right now, even though the Oni were defeated, even though all of these previous hardships have been overcome, they still leave a mark. He is still fearful of his father's inevitable return, and as we saw during Season 11, Lloyd is also fearful of eventually becoming what his father is right now. I think this is very important to understand, and is probably a good reason as to why Garmadon has not come back, though I feel like if Garmadon were to come back, this would make for a very intriguing story to adapt into the main Ninjago TV show. The next one that I want to talk about is all about Harumi, which was another big event in Lloyd's life. Throughout the entirety of Sons of Garmadon and Ninjago Hunted, we saw a very rocky relationship between Lloyd and Harumi, eventually leading in Harumi's death and Lloyd's inevitable regret over how he handled this situation. Some nights I'll be staring straight into Harumi's eyes, standing on the canals of Ninjago City. It all seems peaceful and serene, until the moment I'm warped onto one of Ninjago's tallest skyscrapers, and am forced to watch Harumi's plummet time and time again. Sometimes I wonder if this is what I deserve, for being the one responsible for unleashing the Serpentine back onto Ninjago all those years ago. Is this my karma? My ultimate punishment for playing a vital role in the Devourer's rampage upon Ninjago City? No matter how many lives I save, nothing will change how many were lost on that day. I am a really big fan as to how this paragraph is actually written, because it shows how much grief and guilt Lloyd is holding on to. And I think this is especially important because it combines two key aspects of Lloyd's trauma: his guilt over awakening the Great Devourer, and his guilt over what had happened with Harumi. He witnessed Harumi fall, and that in and of itself was quite traumatizing for him. But also, Harumi was a direct result of one of Lloyd's biggest mistakes. And I feel like this paragraph overall does a fantastic job at summarizing both of those feelings and combining them into one. Next, I want to read a few lines about Moro's possession. The list goes on, but none haunt me more than that of Moro's possession. The things I was forced to do without the slightest ounce of control, the nightmares I was forced to witness within his mind, the absolute and utterly powerless and helpless state of not being able to do a thing while your hands are responsible for the bringing of pain and suffering. It's enough to keep anyone from sleeping at night. I adore how this is written. It showcases how much Lloyd was actually holding back following Moro's possession, and how much guilt he feels over what Moro did while in control of his body. Moro's possession being the thing that affected Lloyd the most, I can totally understand that. In addition to all of Lloyd's trauma that he had faced thus far, imagine what he saw in Moro's head, with how skewed and warped Moro's mind was. Imagine Lloyd having to witness that constantly when being possessed by Moro. I feel extremely bad for Lloyd. Everything that he's gone through so far has just been insane, and I love how Moro's possession has been noted as one of his worst experiences. The splinter in the blind man's eye has been something that I have adored reading week after week, and I cannot wait to read the rest of this story. It is so good in the way that it's actually describing Lloyd's feelings and how he constantly fights with himself, and it's kind of insane to me that the TV show hardly touches on this kind of stuff. And even though this certain story of Ninjago may not be canon to the main timeline, I definitely think it's applicable to Lloyd's character. Because when you think about it, he went through all of these things in the main Ninjago timeline. There's no way he doesn't feel like this, and if he doesn't, then I would be genuinely disappointed. Overall, like I said, this storyline is fantastic so far. I would highly recommend checking it out on Twitter, and once again, big congratulations to the Marvelous Jan and Tommy Andresen for making this story possible. And I cannot wait to read more chapters. With all that being said, you guys, that'll pretty much wrap it up from my thoughts here today, just going through a brief and historic look at Lloyd's trauma and how this new Ninjago story does a great job at highlighting it. Leave all your thoughts down below regarding this, and who knows, maybe we can do videos like this regarding the other ninja. Leave all your thoughts down below, and hopefully you enjoyed today's video. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and check out the links down below in the description for my other forms of social media. As always, big shout out goes out to my Patreon supporters, including once again the Marvelous Jan. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video once again. My name is TannerFishies, and with that I bid you farewell.